All right, well, now we're going to move on to the second question,
Okay.
and that is a little bit more introspective, which this is the direct question from the person that sent it in. Quote, we've all questioned our faith in full or in part during our lives. As a man who has committed his life to God, how do you or have you dealt with those moments, and did those moments strengthen your faith? End quote.
End quote. Yes, 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 and yes. How'd I do?
Good, I think. Yep, there's 3 pieces.
Okay, so let's talk about questioned your faith. I may be kind of an outlier here, but I actually think questioning your faith is a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up in a context where questioning your faith was portrayed as being full of doubt, and it wasn't a good thing. It wasn't an affirmed thing. It was a thing that you should be ashamed of. So there was a bit of a context to my upbringing where if you questioned your faith, you were showing a lack of faith, and therefore you needed to step up. You needed to change that. And that always confused me because of a couple of things. One, I see people in scripture asking questions. You see it all through the book of Psalm. You see it in some of the patriarchs of the Old Testament. They asked questions. They doubted. They weren't convinced. They weren't confident. They were full of fear. Okay, so questions, doubts permeated where they were at the moment in their faith. Um, we see the disciples asking questions, like lots of questions. And then I think the early church, you see you see questions implied.
Mm-hmm.
The reason that they were writing some of the letters that they were in response to things people didn't understand, things people doubted, things people questioned. Okay, so I see a pattern in scripture that questions are permitted. And I don't I don't see many cases in the scriptures where a person's questions are then confronted with a penalty. They were allowed to ask their questions. Um, I think probably one of the best illustrations of this is the whole scenario that unfolded with Jesus and Thomas. Thomas was full of questions and it comes right out and said, I'm not going to believe until I get to see things with my very own eyes. And Jesus provides that. He doesn't shame him for that. He doesn't penalize him for that. He accommodates. Here, Thomas, go ahead. Put your hands. Touch it for yourself. See it for yourself. Um, so I like that. That the examples I see throughout the scriptures of people wrestling with doubt, people having questions, people being conflicted in moments of testing about their faith, um, that gives me the assurance that that's allowed, that that's not a bad thing. The second reason why I really embrace questions as foundational to our faith is I think wise people by nature ask questions. I mean, you take any other, sliver of life. People with money, they ask questions about the best places to invest that money. And before they just go sending their money to that investor or that investment, they ask questions like, what's its history? And, is it trustworthy? And is it legal? I mean, they ask questions because they want to be smart. Parents of a young child who's, looking for a daycare, they're going to ask questions. Who are these people? How are they validated? What kind of safety, security is provided? What are you going to feed my kids? All the questions. That's not because they're full of doubt. It's because they're wanting to be wise about the choice of. Same with selecting a a babysitter, they're gonna ask questions. And so my observation is that wise people ask questions, and it's a way of, collecting data to offset doubts or fears. Wise people do that. And my understanding of the book of Proverbs is it calls me to be wise. And so I just embrace questions as being a part of wisdom. So I come from a camp, I could cite a couple other things, but I come from the camp that questions are a good thing. Questions are a healthy thing. Questions are a wise thing. Um, so do I ask questions about my faith? Do I wrestle with questions about my faith? Absolutely. Absolutely. And always have. And part of that is my personality. Um, I'm a contemplative person. I'm a thinker. I mull stuff over to the point of ad nauseum. I percolate on things for weeks and months and years. Um, I'm a bit of a I don't want to make too much of this. I'm a bit of a skeptic. I'm a bit of a cynic. I don't just believe stuff because somebody told me something. I
You're
want to
you're in good company.
Yeah. Yeah, you and I both, and I wanna test stuff, I wanna validate stuff, I wanna know that the person who's, telling me this thing, I wanna know the credentials for why I should believe or trust what they have to say. Um, so I'm by nature kinda cynical and skeptical, so I come to my faith with the person that I am, and, just the context of that, I believe God created me the way that I am. He gave me a certain inclination to be skeptical, to be curious, to ask questions. Um, some people are wired differently. I don't think God made a mistake in wiring me the way that he did, and therefore I think I'm welcome to come into my faith with who I am and how I am. So, I I ask questions. I I wrestle with stuff a lot. I think I think people would be surprised at how much I wrestle with all sorts of dimensions of my faith. Truth of the matter is, I read stuff in the Bible to this day and I'm just like, "Oh, brother." Okay? I wrestle with things that seem absurd, things that seem really incongruous with, sort of normal life. I wrestle with the hard things that you read in the Old Testament about the ways God chose to act. Uh, I know what they must sound like and look like and appear like to the skeptic or the non-believer. I feel all that. Trust me, I've been in how many stages have I stood on and I'm the one delivering the message about the really hard thing to explain or the really impossible thing to believe and I feel that person in the room like, "I can't believe he believes that." Well, I feel that. So, yeah, I still read stuff in my Bible. I still see ways that God acts that seems incompatible with how I think he should act. Um, I got a long history of prayers that haven't been answered. I've seen some prayers answered. I've seen plenty of prayers that I've prayed for a long time and nothing has changed. And so that creates angst, that creates questions, that creates doubt. Um, so yeah, I live there. I think the difference is I don't beat myself up for it.
Mm.
I give myself the grace. I think because it has a place, um, I sort of walked away from the shame that I kind of grew up around when it came to having questions and doubts and not being convinced of it. So giving myself some permission to live there has been really, really helpful. Um, I think another way that I would respond to that question is, um, just because I doubt, just because I have questions, just because I can't reconcile everything, there are some foundational things that I have resolved to believe, and I don't let the questions and the difficulties and the dilemmas shake me off of the few things that I've resolved.
Yeah, I was about to bring that up.
Yeah. So, um, when those questions come up and those incompatibilities don't make sense, I basically say this to myself: I choose to believe. I'm going to continue to believe. I'm going to continue to believe. Uh, this may not make sense to everybody. It's vivid for me for some reason. Um, I've always kind of compared my faith journey, not always, but at times I've compared my faith journey to being a baseball player. And I walk up to the batter's box and I strike out more times than I get a hit, but I keep stepping up to the box. I keep taking my swings. And sometimes I get a single and it's not impressive. I just get on base. And every once in a while, I might hit a double. That's a big deal. It's a really big deal if I ever hit a triple. Home runs are rare, but occasionally I feel like I have accomplished something in my journey of faith that was home run size, but that's rare. I really feel like more times than not that I strike out. But the resolve inside of me is I'm just going to keep coming to the box and taking my swings rather than just saying, I quit. I'm not going to play baseball anymore.
Yeah.
And I don't know why that illustration's always kind of worked for me in my head is on those days where I'm discouraged and defeated and I feel like this is just a waste of time. And there are days like that, that I just resolve once again, gonna get some sleep and I'll wake up tomorrow and I'll get back in the box.
Yeah. So it's not always about huge leaps, but more just those smaller steps of just continuously
Yeah.
showing up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just take the next step. Do the next right thing. I tell people that when they're asking for advice. Um, do the next right thing. Get up tomorrow morning and determine to do your best to follow Christ.
Yeah.
Um, you know, I try to be pretty authentic about this. I try not to talk about it so much that people end up getting the wrong impression, but being a pastor is hard and um you live with a sort of set of hopes and dreams about how you would like to see God at work, and then you don't. In fact, you see what seems like the opposite. And I make a joke about it, but it's probably more true that it's like people have asked me, "Have you ever wanted to quit?" And I go, "Yeah, just about every Monday, if not every Sunday afternoon." I
Mhm.
drive home and I'm like, "Oh my, that was horrible. That didn't go anything like I wanted it to, or I don't think the audience was paying attention or caring at all, and nothing's going to become of that, and more words for nothing in return." And yeah, it's torturous. Now, I'm not sure every pastor lives like that. I do. This is kind of the nature of my makeup. So I live at times I live pretty tortured inside. And some of that turmoil is built around doubts and questions and frustrations that I have in my faith
Mhm.
with God. And as a part of it, I've embraced. It's sort of my journey. It's sort of the way that I'm wired. It's sort of uh, the room that I still have to grow. And um, I'm comfortable with it. And then there's a lot of time I'm not comfortable with it. I feel a lot of frustration and disappointment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm like you. I'm definitely one who um questions my faith. Really, I mean, I just like I ask questions about who God is or why he did a thing. Um which one I think that we're supposed to wrestle with. I think we're supposed to wrestle with God, right? That's what Israel
Yeah.
means. We who wrestle
Yeah.
with God.
Yeah.
Jacob literally wrestled with him and got hurt for it, but I think that we are supposed to wrestle with him. And also, like if you try to get to know someone, like you get to know someone over talking to them and finding out things about them or by asking them questions. And so, um, just because you ask a question about God doesn't necessarily mean you're doubting. Now, you brought up a good point about some a priori beliefs that you have that aren't shaken whenever you have these questions. So the first one that I thought of was, well, it's a lot easier to be comfortable with your questioning if you rest on the belief that God is good. That I think is a really big one, mainly because the best argument against God is the problem of pain, which is just the existence of suffering and pain in the world.
Right.
And so, you know, someone who loses a loved one is always going to be in that. I mean, they're going to be wrestling pretty hard
Yeah.
with,
Yeah.
God, you, you're supposed to be good, and here I am, right? Like it's what Job experienced all of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now it almost seemed like God got kind of snappy with Job at the end, but
Snappy.
um, but yeah. So like if you believe that God is good, it's much easier to kind of feel easy with those questions. Um, yeah,
I agree with you. I think where I wrestle is the latent, the latent suspicions I have about God being good.
about whether or not He is.
I think he is good.
Yeah,
I think Paul Wilson struggles with understanding his goodness.
yeah, that's what I meant.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Um, so rather than trusting that God is good, I believe he is. I still have trouble trusting it.
Sure.
Um, I always, I really kind of rest in God's always right.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the one that kind of gives me the most foundation. God is right. And the reason that this isn't going quite like I had hoped is because of my expectations, not because of God's failure. That
Yeah.
makes sense?
Hmm.
So, I think that's the one that I keep finding my footing back on is God is right. And I just don't understand him right now. Or I don't like what he's choosing to do right now. Um, so for me personally, I still and I again, a host of reasons, family background, religious background, I still have this mistaken understanding that if God's good, then everything should go right and everything should go well and comfortable and convenient and it shouldn't be heartbreaking
Mm.
and so I that's where I get all wrapped around the axle sometimes.
That makes sense because why I immediately went to good was a big part of my coming to faith and just my faith in general was the story of the blind man in John
9.
9. Thank you. Whenever the disciples asked Jesus, like, why is this man born blind? Was it due to his sin or,
Yeah,
his family? Jesus said, neither this man nor his family, but so the glory of God may be like shown through him.
right.
And so part of like that was read at my grandmother's funeral and it's not like it wasn't an emotional thing for me. It just clicked in my head
Oh,
of, oh, okay. And so like whenever I say good, I'm kind of also tossing in all the bad things that come. Like I've always kind of said since then that like a bad thing will remain bad if you're not on the lookout for the good.
mm,
And so I think that, like, well, if you're not expect like it kind of that idea of like God's like doing miracles and he's at work all the time, but if you don't want to see them,
oh, yeah,
if you're not looking for them, then you're not going to. and
Right.
you're not going to see them. Like, you won't notice the beauty of the world outside if you're not looking for it.
Sure.
And so, and then in my head, if that thing's good, then obviously it was right. Or if it was right, then it was obviously good because God is both of those things all the time. And so, um, yeah, that's where my thing came from. But I totally understand yours too. It's interesting how those two
Yeah.
go to different ways.
Yeah. So I'm 60. I'll be 62 here in July. Um, I guess I'm getting older. I'm having a hard time embracing that. I was telling I had lunch today with a guy. I was telling him I went to a movie the other night and I got the senior citizen discount on the ticket. I was like, how did this happen to me? It was awful. I mean, I liked the discount, but
Yeah.
just the fact that I was taking advantage of it kind of sucked.
Next, you'll
But
be eating alone in Denny's in the senior breakfast.
exactly. Yeah. Um, or the other thing, I went and got my hair cut. This is a year or two ago, but it still kind of impressed my age upon me. I'm getting a haircut, and the gal that was cutting my hair says, "Do you want me to trim your ears?" Like the hair on my ear. Like, you didn't just say that to me, did you?
Is it that bad? Does it need trimming?
So anyways, as I get older, so the part of your question, the end of the question had to do with, kind of progress.
Yeah, does it strengthen your faith?
Does
Yeah.
it strengthen my faith? And I think as I get older, what I'm finding is that a lot of the things that I dread or worry about never happen. And so it's strengthening my faith, like Paul, rest, trust God. He's faithful. Um, he's not gonna step outside of his nature and do something that's so left field. Um, so quit worrying about the worst that could happen. Or um, I talk to a lot of guys, and it's interesting to me how many of them use the exact same phrase. And these are guys that don't even know each other. I can't tell you how many conversations I've been in with men who have said, I live always waiting for the other shoe to drop. They feel afraid of all the things that are going right in their life, and they live in this fear that somehow God's going to take it all away from 'em.
Mm.
And I just was struck. I mean, after I'd had, the 12th conversation with somebody and they used that exact same phrase, I got really intrigued with what are they saying? And there's this, I mean, it's the unique burden of men. It's not to say women don't carry it. I'm just saying men have
Whoa there.
a bit of a unique burden of, the responsibility to provide and protect, and they feel it very deeply. And guys have worked so hard to provide and to protect. And then the whole time they sort of lay awake in the middle of the night staring at the ceiling, afraid it's all gonna come collapsing in around them. And I just got intrigued with it, like, what does that tell me about how they perceive God? And so I've been thinking about it. I can't say I've wrestled it all to the ground and got it figured out, but, here's some of what I'm now saying to them. I'm saying, as a husband and as a father and as a man, you keep making good decisions for the sake of your family, for the sake of your future, for the sake of your character. You keep doing the right thing. You keep doing wise things. And so I encourage them, trust the reward of wisdom. You're doing wise things and wisdom's paying off. Wisdom's protecting you. It's setting a hedge up, a boundary around you to where, danger, the unforeseen circumstances, they can still happen, but you've limited the probability of them happening. So in Proverbs, you have these two characters. You have the wise man and you have the foolish man, or the wise woman, the foolish woman. And what we see in the contrast is that foolish people, they're reckless, they're undisciplined, they make lousy choices, which just opens them up to all sorts of calamity. They save their money, but then they see some get rich scheme and they throw all their money at it and it proves that it's not legit. And now they're living in the calamity of being without their money. Well, I think that's what Proverbs is trying to tell us about foolish living, is to live reckless, to be undisciplined, to be compulsive and to be self-centered, make bad choices, choose bad friends, do stupid stuff. You're just complicating your life, and it's going to follow you for the rest of your life. Whereas on the other hand, the wise person, he's making good choices and he's avoiding, dangerous things, and he tries to anticipate how to protect himself from doing stupid stuff. And then wisdom rewards him with a path that's level, as the scriptures talk about. Um, it's sort of, I don't want to say it insulates him from, anything bad ever happening from him, but it limits his exposure to that sort of downturn.
Yeah, drastically reduces the likelihood.
Yes,
And it also, um, it builds both himself and his family up into the type of people that if and when the storm does come, they can weather it better because
exactly.
they're growing into their character is becoming more like Christ.
Yeah. So I have a very close friend, and he was one of the first people that said this to me. We were having a conversation. We were on an airplane flying and coming back from something, and we were just sitting there talking, and he said to me, "Paul, I always feel like at any moment the other shoe's going to drop." And I asked him what that meant, and I've known him for 20, almost 25 years, and it took me a while, and it wasn't till years later that I could speak this into his life after I'd kind of wrestled with it a bit. I just said to him, "Quit fearing the other shoe's gonna drop. You have done such a diligent job at being a good husband and a great father." I didn't mean to imply he's less of a husband than he was a fa great husband, great father, great person. You're honest, you're humble, you are loyal, you are industrious, all just I said, "You've created a context for your life to prevail." One of the reasons why I was saying to him, one of the reasons why I think your life is going so well and will continue on that trajectory is because you're doing wise things.
Mhm.
And the reward of God's favor is upon you because you've honored God in the choices you've made.
You're working within the order upon which God is
Exactly. You're
set up.
working within the order. That's a great way to say that.
Mm.
And so, um, going back then to where this all started, as I get older, my faith is growing. I'm finding myself to be more likely to trust God because now I've got a bit of a track record stored up that it's not as bad as I might imagine. And God's come through 100 times before. What makes me think He's not going to come through on the 101st time?
Mhm.
And I think that's where my faith is growing. Um, Certainly, I think I think one of the ways that faith grows or increases is that you learn more about the truths of your faith. And I don't mean just intellectual learning. You learn by experience that these things are true and reliable and trustworthy. And so, again, 62 years and almost 40 years of being a pastor, I've seen enough of a pattern to go, "Oh, this is generally how this is going to go," and you don't have to worry about it.
Yeah.
I'm not saying don't be proactive or don't do what you need to do, but you don't have to be afraid of it just, blowing up.
And in the end, it really doesn't really help just sitting there and being scared of it anyways.
No. I mean, there's a reason why Jesus, the Apostle Paul, other New Testament authors, have so much to say about worry. It's just a drain. It's a drain on faith. Either trust me or you don't.
Yeah.
And
Somebody I was listening to said that Christians have no excuse to be fearful. I was like, "Hmm,
yeah, in the grand scheme of things,
yeah.
that's true.
Not that it's unacceptable if you're a Christian to be fearful. Of
Right.
course not. I'm
Right.
just saying, like, even tell myself when I'm getting afraid.
Yeah. I mean, because if you look at the great illustrations of faith in the scriptures, you have people facing what essentially were impossible obstacles, and in courage, they stepped out. And so, if you truly believe that God's capable of everything and anything, then yeah, it'd be nice to think I could, in that faith, my confidence in what He's capable of, I could step forward.
Mhm.
But we're human and we wrestle with the doubts and the questions and what ifs. What if he doesn't come through? What if he doesn't provide? What if he doesn't protect? And that kind of, struggling faith holds us back and keeps us from really realizing some of what we're capable of.
I even think that it takes courage to ask questions
Yeah.
a lot of the time. 'Cause, I mean, there's some things people don't wanna ask because they're either afraid their community might look down on them for lack of faith or that it's going to uncover this whole mess that might kinda come underneath things.
Yeah.
Yeah. Courage
Yeah.
is a good thing, and I think that faith is kind of a necessity for courage because courage isn't just not being afraid, it's acting despite being afraid.
Right.
Um, and you act despite being afraid because you have faith in God that, he's both good and right.
Yeah. I've worked at Cibolo. I've worked hard to try to create a permission at Cibolo that questions, even doubts, they're welcomed here. Um, and we try to model that in a lot of different ways. Me being authentic with my own struggles with questions, Q&A Sundays, those are ways that we model. Questions are welcome here. And I mean, just before I came over here today, I had lunch with a gentleman. He's kind of new to our church and new to his faith. And we had just done a series of messages on the centrality of Jesus, and one of those messages was making the case for the deity of Jesus. And he just wrote me a really friendly email. He's like, "Dude, I wasn't ready for that. That's not what I think. I'm curious. Can you help, explain that to me a little bit more?" And so we've been playing tag with trying to get a lunch schedule. We just had lunch today, and and we were talking about this topic, and I was just affirming him, yay on your questions. Yay you for asking questions because those are the doorways to discovery.
Yeah.
And you don't have to have it all figured out, and none of us do, but don't be shy about admitting, I'm really curious. This doesn't make sense. I can't reconcile this, but I'm going to keep leaning into it until some other things make better sense to me. And I go, that is so healthy. Don't ever be shy or ashamed of having questions about those things. I was trying to reassure him that at Cibolo, there shouldn't be anybody to penalize you for that. I'm not
Yeah.
saying you won't run into the rogue, person, but
If you do, give us their name.
yeah, report them to me,
Yeah.
please. Uh, no, there's a couple of them I live with each Sunday that they always take exception with whatever I have to say, and I guess that just comes with the territory.
Another cool part about asking questions is that you can rest easy in the fact that you're not the first one to ask that question.
Yeah,
Because, like, not only are there other people around you in, say the same church that probably have asked or are asking the same question,
sure.
but there's also 2,000 years of um,
Well,
people who are way smarter than any of us who have asked that question and wrestled with that question and then wrote about that question. And there's all, I mean, that's something I found is that, like, oh, like, there's way more than I can ever read on any of my questions,
yeah,
you know?
yeah. In fact, when we were getting started in a conversation at lunch, we've spent a lot of time just getting acquainted with each other. But once we finally got to the topic, um, he explained that he believed God always existed, but he believed that then Jesus was created by God. Because I asked him, I said, okay, until you heard me say that Jesus was divine, what did you think before that? He said, well, I guess I just assumed that Jesus, like everybody, was created. And I go, okay, so that was your paradigm. You were operating from the paradigm that Jesus had a beginning,
Mhm.
that he was created and he was just another act of creation, just like any of the rest of it. I said, first of all, I just want to tell you that's reasonable. You're not intellectually insufficient because you think that. That would be a reasonable assumption to make. So you're thinking reasonably. What is happening now is you're just learning additional information to add to the paradigm.
Yeah.
And as you come into uh, contact with more information, other things that you hadn't considered, your paradigm's being challenged. It's not that your paradigm's wrong, it's just being challenged to consider other dimensions. And I said, that's largely what the journey of faith is I have some paradigms and over time I add information to the paradigms and it challenges it. And pretty soon the walls of that paradigm get broken out and I have space for a few more things that I kind of take in. And then I go, a lot of the spiritual journey of the faith journey is then taking all of my paradigms and starting to connect them,
Mhm.
that they all fit together. And um, that's where your faith ends up growing deep and finding stability as you go. Oh, these things all work together in an organic system that
Yeah,
is
systematize, yeah.
is reasonable and rational and intellectual. It's not like you're just pie in the sky. You're putting together facts and figures, data that inform your paradigm and your paradigm's growth.
Is that basically the definition of systematic theology?
No,
Oh, sounds like the same thing.
it's systematic. I don't know if it's the strict definition of systematic theology. Okay, I see what you're saying. It would be similar. Systematic theology, as I understand it, I always describe it as a puzzle. I find 1,000 pieces of information throughout the Bible on a topic, and then I put all those pieces together, and I come up with the understanding of that topic.
Mm.
Is that your understanding of systematic?
Yeah, we don't have to get into it. I don't see how that differs from the first thing you just described.
Oh, um, I guess I understood what you say as um, the adding of things to the paradigm is systematic theology.
Mm.
I see what
I
you're
was
saying.
talking about how all these things work together into a comprehensive,
Okay.
I
Then
guess,
yes.
worldview or whatever.
Yes, I guess I misunderstood what you were
Sorry.
saying.
Nobody cares except for us right now.
Our listeners
Ow.
have long tuned out.
How do they go from doubt to systematic theology?
Uh, so, again, back to the question, do I have doubts and questions? Yes, to this day. Some of them are big and significant. I don't feel like I'm a bad person or I'm failing God because I have questions and doubts. And I guess the best way to answer the last part of the question is, as I see things prove themselves to be trustworthy again and again and again, my confidence grows
Yeah.
that I shouldn't live in fear of the worst happening.
Mhm.
Um, I just recently, this last couple years, have really started to attach the word confidence and courage to my discussion of faith.
Yeah, I've noticed that.
I think that a God-based faith was intended to give human beings confidence and courage. I mean, when you think about like it's Old Testament illustration, David walking out onto that field with Goliath.
Mhm.
Goliath is a soldier. Um, he's he's gigantic in proportion. He's big. All right. Whether he's Jolly Green Giant, I don't think it was that. I think it was just an unusually large human being, a soldier outfitted with the weaponry and everything a soldier would come with. And he's taunting the nation of the soldiers of Israel. And David's just a shepherd boy who shows up at the front lines to deliver some food to his brothers who are soldiers. And he can't understand why they're letting this giant of a man mock God. And so he takes some stones and he just walks out onto the field. Now, was he afraid? Were his knees shaking? I don't have a problem admitting that. I mean, recognize that they probably were. But he was moving forward in a confidence of what he understood to be true. And he's basically, no one mocks my God.
Mhm.
And he goes out and he, delivers the killing shot. Um, I like that picture of the confidence and courage of this young man against this formidable foe because of his faith, what he believed to be true about God. And I think there's a connection between, earlier references in the life of David about him slaying a lion and a bear. He'd had some battles and he'd seen God's protection. So when he's facing off this giant of a soldier, he's basing off some history, he's basing off of some kind of foundational beliefs, and he finds a courage and a confidence to walk out onto that battlefield.
Mhm.
And I'm trying to integrate, at least in my own life, I'm trying to integrate more of a connection to those two things. Paul, that if you are a man of faith, you ought to be a man of courage and a man of confidence. Not arrogant, uh, but this kind of peaceful self assurance about moving into things that are difficult.
Yeah. Very good.
Does that help?
Yeah. I guess we'll see.
We'll see.
It was a good conversation, though.
Hey, I'm encouraged. I think I've met listeners 4, 5, and 6.
Really?
Yeah, I've had some people tell me, I just want you to know it's not just your mom and his mom. We're listening to it. And, in fact, last night I had a thing up at the church. So I was coming back. I had been at the office all day. I went home to uh, brush my teeth real quick and I came back to the office. And the teenagers were all hanging out, before their service. And one of the girls, I think she's maybe a sophomore or junior. I was literally just walking by. She goes, Pastor Paul, hey, I was listening to your podcast today.
Huh.
I was like, wow.
Nice.
So maybe the audience is up to 6 or 7 now.
I think it actually is growing, yeah. The Q&A Sundays always boost our
Oh, does it?
yeah.
Okay.
Well, and we started again right after Q&A Sunday.
Oh, yeah.
So it was all part of the plan.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yes, we knew exactly what we were doing.
We didn't know the date for Q&A Sunday until like 2 weeks before, but it's but yeah, no, I do think that we're getting more listeners now. So
Oh, good.
I think I really think it's a good resource for our people. When in doubt, it's just more time they can listen to
Yeah.
You talk.
Like that's what people are wanting. Sit and listen to Paul talk for 4
Yes.
It's encouraging to see people interested in learning, whether they're learning from
Yeah.
us or learning from somebody else or learning from this podcast or learning from some other resource. I get encouraged when I see people learning. Like last night, um, we're having an experience at church where these folks have committed to a course of study for 10 weeks. And I got to, I got to share last night with them. And it was on the topic of giving.
They called you in for the fun lesson.
Yeah, so they called me in for that one. But anyways, I was complimenting the folks that were there last night. I don't know, 40, 50 people. I said, one, you came out on a night when it's been pouring rain, and 28 years of serving at this church, and I don't think this is unique to Cibolo, but we've seen that when the weather's really bad, people don't show up for stuff. We can always tell what a Sunday attendance is going to look like if there's been a lot of rain or cold weather or something like that. So I said, one, you showed up on a night where it's pouring down rain. Two, you showed up in week 8 of a 10-week study, because we have found that anything beyond 3 weeks, we generally lose participation. So here you are, 8 weeks into this, and you're still here. And then all of you came here tonight knowing that our topic was giving. And we have found that usually that's a topic most people are not interested in listening to. And so I had a really wonderful occasion to sit with these 40, 50 people, and they were all, at least they were all acting very interested. Like they were eager to learn
Yeah.
about this topic, not get yanked around, not, getting manipulated by it. I just walked them through 4 or 5 passages of scripture that had to do with what the scriptures say about giving. And we had and so I'm encouraged to see people be curious about learning more. What are they doing? They're adding to their paradigm.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I completely agree. You're starting to see more of it, especially now with just new ways of being able to learn podcasts and videos. And
Yeah.
granted, it's causing the destruction of a lot of things, but there's also some light coming out of it too.
Exactly.
But
Well, thanks for today.
we hope you enjoyed this presentation of Cibolo Creek Community Church. If you did, please consider supporting the ministry of our church. Your donations make a difference. To check out more resources or to share a gift, please visit us at cibolocreek.com. Thanks for listening.